Well, hello everyone. By my watch, it is 12 o'clock. That would be 12 o'clock Central Time. So it is time for us to start our webinar. So Dana, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thanks Maria. Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dana Childress and I work in Virginia. I'm going to be co-facilitating today with Maria Castanis, who works in Illinois. So Maria and I will introduce ourselves a little bit more a little later on. But first we wanted to just welcome you. We're really excited. We're so happy to see so many people joining us. This is the first National Service Coordination webinar, so as you can imagine, it's a pretty big deal for us. We were delighted to see so many people interested in this topic. We thought this topic is really not something that gets enough attention, even when you really just think service coordination. Service coordination itself doesn't get enough attention and probably doesn't get enough notice for the important work that service coordinators do. So we wanted to spend some time with you thinking about the role of the service coordinator in building relationships with families in early intervention. We felt like this topic was really an important one to dig into, and so today is just our first webinar. We're hoping to have some more to continue with a series of webinars, and when you receive your survey at the end of the webinar, you'll have an opportunity to tell us what else you'd like to talk about, what other topics related to service coordination would be important to you. So let me turn this back over to Maria to walk you through some of your tools, and then we'll dig into the service coordination role. Maria?
Thanks, Dana. So as I've been posting, and I'll post this again, if you haven't already, you can download the resources that Dana and Maria will be talking about today, along with a notes handout that you can use as well. So I'm sorry, I'm doing two things at once, posting and talking. Sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But anyway, there's the link, and all of the resources they referenced today will be found there. So you've been seeing in the chat box a little bit about, participation and certification. So after the webinar is over, you will get an email. Look for it, because in that email will be that survey that Dana was referencing, and you'll need to complete that survey in order to get a certificate of attendance. So now it's an Illinois EI credit, so just make sure that you check with your own individual state to make sure that they accept Illinois state licensure credit. So most do, but you just want to make sure. So that being said, I'm also going to talk a little bit about participation. Webinars are awesome because you get to sit wherever you are and don't have to get up and go someplace, drive someplace, go through the weather. But we can't see you and you can't see us. So we do ask that we find some other ways to participate. And one of those is through a couple of tools I'm going to show you here real quick. So the first tool, if you look on the left side of your screen, at the very top it'll say audio video, and then you'll see a section that says participants, and then your name should be there, and underneath your name should be 4 boxes. We're going to not really use the first 2 boxes, but I'm going to hone you in right here on that 3rd box, which is a hand raise tool. So there may come a time when Dana or Maria will ask you a question and ask you to raise your hand. You just click on that hand and raise your hand, and you'll see that come up. And then when we're done, you can click on it again, and it'll lower your hand, just like if you were in a real room. How about that? The 4th box is a polling function box, and we're gonna be asking some polls from time to time. And when we do that, we're gonna direct you to open up that 4th box, and you'll see the poll choices. We'll get to that here in just a bit. Most importantly is the chat. So since we're doing this via computer, you can't really ask us questions, by mouth. So we want you to ask your questions by chat. So anytime you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Dana and Maria will address them as they see fit. And they will also, if you also have any strategies, they may ask you just to respond to some answers as well via the chat. So please feel free to do that. That chat box should also be on your left-hand side right below the participants. All right. So with that, I think I've got it all. Dana, you ready to take on over?
Yeah, thanks so much, Maria. I really appreciate that. And just like Maria said, we would love for you guys to use the chat box. We have a big crowd today, so Maria and I will do our best to keep up with the chat, but feel free to use it to post your comments and your questions, and we'll ask you to post answers to different things that we wanted to talk to you about today too. So the chat box is your voice. So today what we wanted to do is start out by all of us kind of getting on the same page, I guess you could say setting the stage, like you see the video title on the screen. We are going to ask you to take about 4 minutes and watch a quick video. But before you do, we're going to put the link in the chat in just a moment. Before you click the video, though, I want to walk you through some things. So the video is a video that was posted by folks from the Family Guided Routines-Based Intervention Work out of Florida and their collaboration with Iowa. Our purpose in using this video today is not so much to talk about family-guided routines-based intervention, but to talk about the role of the service coordinator in high-quality early intervention. So we loved this video because you're going to have a chance to hear from real service coordinators talking about their work. So as you watch the video, we would love for you to be able to take a couple of notes about what you hear, specifically related to the roles and responsibilities of the service coordinator, and link those up with building relationships with families. So once you watch your video, once you have the link in the chat, you'll click that link. Oh, it'll open up a browser window for you to watch. Once your video is done, come back. You're going to use the raise hand tool that Maria just talked us through. And then that will, oh, thank you, Maria, she just pointed it out on the screen. So that tool for you is to the left of your slide in that participants box. Click that, and then you'll come back to that way we'll know when you're back and we can talk about the video. All right, it looks like, Maria, we're having some audio problems in the chat. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. So for those of you who have just joined and are having some audio issues, at the very top of your screen on the left-hand side, you'll see that section that says audio and video. And then you should see a couple icons, one that looks like a phone and one that looks like a microphone with a flower on it. The microphone with the flower is your audio setup wizard, and you'll need to probably click that to make sure that your microphones can work. So if you are having trouble hearing, try using the audio wizard first. And if you continue to have trouble hearing, log off and log back on. In the meantime, I posted the link to the video, so hopefully folks are downloading that.
Okay, guys, so yeah, if you might need to scroll up in your chat just a bit, find that link, click it, and go watch the video. I'll be quiet so you can hear your audio on your computer. Okay, so Angie, I see you've typed in here you can't hear any audio at all. That was okay. We were being quiet for a little while where we're giving people a chance to watch the video. And I'm seeing lots of hands pop up, so I think folks are wrapping up the video, which is wonderful. So for those of you that I saw notes in chat that some of you weren't able to see the video, don't panic. We're going to be just fine for the rest of the webinar. We have put the link in chat several times, so if nothing else, if you can try to copy and paste it and watch it later, I would encourage you to take a look at the video if you did miss it and watch it with your service coordinators, because it's a great resource. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is just pause for a minute, hold on to your observations and your notes about the video. We wanted to have a chance to find out where you were, and Maria and I were going to introduce ourselves, then we'll come back to the video. Or at least we'll come back to talking about what are some of the things service coordinators do to start building those relationships. So it's okay for now. We're going to move past the video and keep going. Okay, so let me, Maria and I just wanted to let you know a little bit about ourselves, and then we want to hear about you guys. So I'm going to use my pointer tool and drop a little hand on Virginia. So like I said, I'm Dana. I work in Virginia. I'm actually in the southeastern part of my state. I work on our state's professional development team as an early intervention professional development consultant. So I'm on a small team that's tasked with developing and providing professional development, developing lots of resources. We have a website we manage and a blog, all things early intervention for our practitioners in Virginia. So before I was in this role, I worked in direct service for about 15 years across a couple of different EI programs, and I was always, most always in a dual role. So I was an educator and a service coordinator, just like the practitioner you saw in the video. So when I was wearing both hats, or whether I was or not, I always had an appreciation for the importance of the service coordinator's role. I mean, your role is the only role that's actually designated as required for all families in the federal law. You're a central point of contact for families, and you have a hard job. It's a lot to juggle. So I'm really happy today that we get the chance to talk about this important role. So I'm going to turn it over to Maria so she can introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Illinois Early Intervention Training Program. The Illinois Early Intervention Training Program provides professional development opportunities for early intervention professionals in Illinois. In my previous work, I was a service coordinator in Chicago, Illinois for over 17 years. And just like Dana, I'm really thrilled and excited to be here today, as I truly believe the role of the service coordinator is key and pivotal for families in early intervention. So again, I'm just thrilled to be here, but welcome everyone.
All right, thanks, Maria. So next we wanted to see where you guys were. So Maria and I are Illinois and Virginia. We wanted to give you a chance to let us know where you are. So you're going to use the pointer, just like I'm using here where I was pointing to Virginia. You're going to actually use the pointer tool that looks like the one you see on screen. It's just to the left of your slide. When that tool, you're going to click the second box from the top, which you'll see usually one of these icons. It's often the starburst is where you start. Click in that box, then move your cursor over to the slide and click again. I see somebody just dropped in Virginia and Colorado. Yep, you can drop one pointer. So go ahead. This is awesome. You guys are all over the place. So let me see where you end up, because this is a national effort. So we were really excited to see who was joining us, where were folks. And I see we have a couple people. Oh, Hawaii. We have somebody who's out in the white space. So if you're out in the white space, type it into chat and let us know where you're from. So it looks like, Maria, we have folks from all over the place, which is wonderful. And you know, it's especially nice for service coordinators because we often see our jobs through the lens of our program or maybe our state. We don't often have the opportunity as service coordinators to interact with folks from other places to really find out different ways to do service coordination. No matter where you are, the best practices for this field of service coordination are the same, but what it looks like might vary depending on your program's requirements. All right, thank you guys. Thanks for playing along. That gives us a nice visual picture of where you are. We're delighted to have you joining us. So next, I'm going to give you a quick, just a quick orientation to how this webinar came about. So the webinar is an effort of the National Service Coordination Training Workgroup. The workgroup is under the umbrella of the Early Intervention, Early Childhood Professional Development Community of Practice. So both groups are made up of folks who are in professional development, interested in training for early childhood and early intervention. We come together, talk about needs in our states, what we're working on, share ideas, and we found a common need for service coordination training. So the work group then formed as an effort to try to combine resources, think about similar topics that we needed to have addressed in the webinar. That's how these webinars bubbled up. So we're hoping to do more than just this one. We're also, the work group is made up of folks from at least, I think, 10 states now, but we're hoping to do state and national initiatives like build service coordination competencies, think about training, think about other resources, and really how to build the identity of service coordination as a profession to really elevate that respect level, because we know what you do is important. We want everybody else to know that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Maria to get us started thinking about our topic today. Maria?
Okay, thanks, Dana. Today we're going to talk about the important role service coordinators play in building strong and caring relationships with families. Today we will review 2 key principles and 5 recommended practices that relate to how service coordinators build relationships with families. We're also going to discuss 4 activities service coordinators engage in when building relationships with families. And finally, we're going to develop specific strategies that service coordinators can use with families. As we get started, let's take a second to really look at this picture. And as you're looking at this picture, if you can use your chat box to just jot down, what do you see happening here? What are you seeing in the picture? So I'm just going to give people a second just to chat in the chat box what they're seeing in the picture. What comes to mind when you see this picture? So Candace is saying she sees family involvement. Someone from Colorado is saying the mom looks very comfortable. The girl is engaged. Someone said explaining rights or the process to families. Absolutely. We see the service coordinator here doing paperwork with a mother. Service coordinators can often be seen or even many times feel like the paper pushers on the EI team. And while managing documentation like ensuring families know their rights, monitoring the IFSP is an important part of service coordination. Like many of you probably know, it's only one of the important things that service coordinators do. So I'm going to have people use the chat box again to just jot down what are some of the other things that service coordinators engage in with families. So other than the paperwork aspect, what else are some of the responsibilities of a service coordinator? And someone from Norfolk is saying link to resources. Jen is saying make connections to community programs, assist families in locating needed resources. Greg is saying talk about daily routines. Yes, Greg, and find out more information about that. Myri is saying transition families, advocate for families. Great, thanks you guys. You guys are giving some great information here. Today we're going to talk about some of these important activities and how they relate to building relationships with families. So I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
All right, thanks, Maria. Yeah, some really good ones. I love that somebody noticed that the service coordinator is down at trying to be near the eye level of the parent. So really sort of equalizing that relationship, even with her body language. That's a wonderful thing to be very aware of. It just sort of builds that comfort and that trust with the family. So we also wanted to gather a little more information from you to find out your role, because the way you do service coordination and the activities and your responsibilities could depend to some extent on how long you work with families. What are you actually doing? So some of you might be temporary or what's called interim service coordinators, so you work with families through the initial IFSP. Some of you might be designated or service coordinators where you only provide service coordination. You don't have a dual role or blended hat where you're also a service provider like I was as an educator. We also know folks might be supervisors or other kind of support personnel. So to take the poll, I see some of you are jumping in on the chat, which is awesome. You can also take this poll by going to the left of your screen, and we're going to use the polling feature. So under your name on the participant box, you'll see a little box with a lowercase a. Hover over that box, and then you'll see a drop-down menu with your A through E responses. So click. I see folks are starting to click their choices, which is awesome. So we've got choices coming in both places. And I see some familiar names popping up in the chat, which is wonderful. I'm just going to give you a few more seconds, and then we will publish and see. Awesome. Maria, do you mind publishing the poll for me, please? All right. So we have a lot of designated service coordinators. That's great. And then we have a little bit of mix from the other areas as well. So you know, good service coordination is good service coordination, regardless of how far you follow families in the process. Sometimes service coordinator can be a little bit of a challenge, right, if you're in that dual role. Some people say it can make it easier because you're wearing both hats. Well, we hope those of you that are in these roles and supporting service coordinators will share your expertise for today. So I also wanted to find out from you how long you've been a service coordinator. So use the same feature, the same polling feature, to click your choice to let us know if you're new, if you've been doing service coordination for a while, or if, like me, you feel like you've been in the field since the dawn of time. So go ahead and click your polling option. And I see a couple folks looks like are typing into chat too. Lisa says, dawn of time, I'm with you. Yep.
If you click on the polling function, that allows us to be able to post those results. So certainly we're happy that you guys are posting in chat. If you could also post it in the polling function, that would be helpful as well. Thank you.
I see Lorna Thompson says, since the dawn of time, 26 plus years. Wow, Lorna, that is a long time. Marty says, we have a group of 7 watching. It varies. And that's okay. That's okay, Marty. We knew we'd have groups, so we just wanted to get an idea. I see a couple of you are using your pointer tools. We've got all kinds of input coming in. So thanks for publishing, Maria. So we have folks, kind of a variety of, we have folks that are brand new, some that have been doing it for a long time. And that's a great thing, too. We hope that you will share your expertise wherever you are in the process as we move through our webinar today. So now let's go back to our video. So what I'm going to ask you to do is type into the chat what are some things you either heard in the video or you just know, for those of you that weren't able to access it, that are maybe things that service coordinators do to build strong relationships with families. These could be activities, they could be qualities of a service coordinator. Type into chat, what do we do to build strong relationships with families? What are some really important things that service coordinators do? Shamika nails it, our very first one, listening. Actually, all the first 4 or 5 folks are saying listening, which is great. That's such a great thing for us to start with. Yep, Kim says supporting, helping families understand the process. Emily, that's a great one because you are the expert in the early intervention process. So that's part of how you share your expertise. I see folks writing being authentic, staying organized. That's a really important one. Listening and communicating. Marty, I love that. Take our judgy pants off at the door. I think that would be a great t-shirt for service coordinators, wouldn't it? So yeah, like Carrie says, empowering families, being non-judgmental. So these are all, you guys just nailed it. These are all sort of perspectives we have to have. They're like, they should be in our job descriptions as service coordinators. Be knowledgeable, be empathetic, absolutely, and happy to be there. We want families to know we are happy to get to know them. So building that relationship is really important, right? So type into the chat now, why is it so important that service coordinators work to build strong relationships with families? We know it's important, but why? Why does it matter to the early intervention process? Type that into chat. We're the front line, you're right. It's important for families to feel comfortable, to trust us. Myri says, we're the point of contact. We need to build good rapport because we are in their home. Yeah, we have to remember we are a guest in this family's home. And Beth says, you can't get anywhere without trust and comfort. That's a great point, Maureen says positive outcomes. Our relationships are part of what's going to bring about positive outcomes. And the research, actually, the little bit of research we have on service coordination tells us that the relationship families have with us, their experience of service coordination matters when we look at the outcomes of what they think of the experience of early intervention in the very end. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Maggie says people don't care what you know until they know you care. So we want to build this relationship that's grounded in that mutual respect, caring perspective. Heather says we are working with their most precious people. There is nothing more precious, so we want to show families that we value them too. Because working in EI or families working with us is a really personal experience. So we need to get to know the family, get to know the child, get to know how they work, because we need all this information to not only make sure overall services are individualized, right? The IFSP is individualized. We need to make sure our service coordination is individualized as well. Without a good relationship, it's really almost impossible to provide high-quality service coordination. So I'm going to turn it back over to Maria, and she's going to talk to us a little bit of perspective on the language we use. Maria?
Thanks, Dana. How service coordinators think about the families and their work is an important component of building strong relationship. The language we use really matters. This is actually considered in the federal law that guides early intervention. In 1991, Public Law 99-457 was reauthorized. What happened at that time was the terminology case management was changed to service coordination. As families commented that they were not cases and that they did not need to be managed. Depending on your professional background, you may have used this terminology in the past. However, for early intervention, we do not use this terminology to refer to families. So I want everyone to think for a moment. If you've used the term caseload in the past, what's another way that you can describe this? If you can go ahead and use your chat box to jot down your answers. So Alonda is saying clients. Let's see, the families we serve is coming, and Maggie's saying families, the families I serve. Lots of families serve, parents. We're getting lots of families that I work with, from Karen. I would even consider just planting an idea in everyone's head. Sometimes I would think about families as partners that I work with, because that is truly a partnership. As we're working with the family, it is that exchange of information. The family is giving you lots of great information about what's important to them, their priorities, and you're giving them information about the system and early intervention. So really getting in the mindset to think about this partnership, that we're both early intervention, the service coordinators, and the family, they're equal partners in this process. Hilda is saying teammates. I love that. We are teammates because we are all members of the team. And Karen is saying we have beginners and some seasoned service coordinators here listening, asking concerns, preparing families for evaluation and service. Great. Thank you, Karen. I love that. In addition to guidance from IDEA, we have several other sources where we can look for guidance for service coordinators. This document that you see on screen has been widely adopted in the early intervention field as a guiding document of how we could provide EI services in natural environments. This document describes our mission, which reads, Part C, Early Intervention, builds upon and provides supports and resources to assist families and caregivers to enhance the children's learning and development through everyday learning opportunities. 7 key principles are identified that are important in achieving this mission. And really, when you think about this document, even going back and reading it, and sometimes even before seeing a family, thinking about the mission, really reflecting on the mission for a minute to really keep you focused on what the mission is. So if you've if you've heard of this document or if you've seen this document, go ahead and raise your hand. So I'm going to have people just use their hand raising function. Great. So I see that lots of people have heard of this document. If you haven't read this document, it's really easy to find if you Google Mission and Key Principles of Early Intervention. And if you haven't read it, we highly recommend it as required reading for all EI participants, including service coordinators. We're going to focus on two of the principles today, but we really encourage you to review the rest of these principles after the webinar, as they're really good guiding principles. We want to highlight two of the key principles that are especially relevant to service coordination. When we look at key principle number 2, it reminds us about our beliefs about families. We must believe that all families with the necessary supports and resources can enhance their children's learning and development. This belief expresses itself in our relationships, how we engage families, and how we support their participation in the EI process. Key principle number 4 really focuses on the process. According to key principle number 4, the early intervention process from the initial contacts through transition must be dynamic and individualized to reflect the family and the child's preferences, learning styles, and cultural beliefs. The key words here when I think about this principle are dynamic and individualized, meaning that the process and our relationship with families must be flexible and in tune to what's important and unique to families. This is the part that we really find out what is on the family's mind. This is key in this information sharing process.
Absolutely, Maria. I love that word dynamic too. That reminds us of the inherent flexibility in what we can do. It's almost like that's a hard part of the job too, because it's always changing, but I think it's a fun part of being a service coordinator, because no day is ever the same, and half the time no home visit is ever the same, even from one family to the next. So I love that part of the work. All right, so let me show you another good resource. I was glad to see so many people knew about this document, and I even saw Emily said this is a key document in their training process for their new family service coordinators. That's wonderful. So hopefully you're also aware of the Division for Early Childhood's recommended practices. This Division for Early Childhood is under the Council for Exceptional Children. In 2014, they re-released a revised version of their recommended practices, and rather than being a book, it's now a PDF that's available free online, so you can access the resources through the second link that you see in the chat right now, or you can Google it. It's really easy to find. It's a great resource. You'll find that it really outlines a series of practices that anyone who works with young children and their families should use. So that includes you. You often look at the key principles and the recommended practices, and it's easy for us to say, oh, that's for the service providers, the OTs, the PTs, speech, educators. But you are absolutely reflected as service coordinators in this document too. There's a variety of topic areas. You have assessment practices and instruction, interaction practices, teaming and collaboration. Today, though, we're going to just focus in on a couple of the family practices because there's such a close tie not only to our topic, but also to the work you do. So we encourage you to download these documents and take some time to reflect. Read them, but not just reading them for the information, but then pause and think about how is what I'm doing with my families that I work with yesterday, today, tomorrow, how does it measure up? Am I reflecting these practices? And when you aren't, we all have room to improve. That's okay. Just think about, so what could I do differently? So on the next slide, I'm going to start showing you two practices. We're going to talk about them and try to drill in on some key words. So family practices and recommended practices for engaging families. Family practice number 1. So I love it that family practice number 1, the very first practice, zeroes in on the relationship. So practitioners, including you, the service coordinator, build trusting and respectful partnerships. And you guys use those words in your chat you just talked about a little while ago. You're going to build these partnerships with families through your interactions that are sensitive and responsive to what's unique about families, their cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic diversity. So yeah, building these important partnerships is just a foundational concept for us, right? When we think about key principle number 2 here, we want to be providing family with the information that they need to make informed decisions. So up-to-date, comprehensive, and so important, unbiased information. So now let's think about, what does this look like for service coordinators? So you talked about earlier the importance of building trusting partnerships, but what do you actually do when you're talking with families, when you're calling them, meeting them, that helps build these types of partnerships? Type it into chat for me. What does this actually look like in your day-to-day work? You can also think about sharing information with families. How do you do that in ways that make sure they have the information they need? So what does it all look like in your work? Type it into chat for me. Maggie has a great one. Be on time. Be reliable. You show respect for the family when you respect their time. So it's a great point, Maggie. Ask what they want. Ask the family if now is a good time for a visit. Being responsive. I love it. Both many of you are saying talking in a manner they can understand. Finding out what's important. Communicating, and then Brandy makes a good point, following up, always doing what you say you're going to do. Norfolk says reading body language, that's a big part of it. And then whatever you read, like Colorado says, being non-judgmental. I love it. Lisa says be kind and listen. Don't push an agenda. That's a great one. Greg says stop using EI lingo. Don't expect that they know the system like we do. That's a great point, Greg. So early on, we know families come to this system, and it is a new, I had a family once introduce me to someone, and they said, she's part of this universe you don't even know exists until you need it. And it was so profound to me because I didn't, that universe was my universe, right? That's what I did all day. But for her, it was a whole nother ballgame. So Crystal says the same thing. Talk in a language they understand. Make it easy. Landra says, don't assume that you know. And I think don't assume that families know. So that back and forth is so important. Making sure we're doing all these things in a way to support families' participation in the process is so important. And in fact, helping families have the information they need and the collaboration with us to make the decisions that are important to them is a key part of family-centered practices. So not only do our other service providers practice it, but service coordinators practice and monitor to make sure we're all using these good practices. Good. Oh, and Jessica makes a good point, translating if necessary. So we want to make sure we're not only talking about EI lingo, but making sure that all the information and the partnership operates in the family's native language as much as possible. So it's a great point. So let's look at 2 more practices. So up here with family practice 3, you guys have used this word. Practitioners are responsive to families' concerns, priorities, and changing circumstances. You all have said constantly we need to be checking in with families regularly. And I love family practice 4. This gets to the partnership. What is it? What's the purpose? We're working together to create outcomes or goals, to develop that IFSP, and to implement practices that address the things that are important to families. It all comes back to their priorities and their concerns. What do they want for their children? I love that. So now I want to challenge you to type into chat, where do the challenges come along? What can make it hard for a service coordinator to be responsive to the changes? Or what can be challenging about working together to make sure we're addressing families' priorities? Type it into chat for me. What are some challenges you face? Maureen says it can be hard sometimes to, well, you could be talking about either one, Maureen. Sometimes focusing on strengths can be hard. Providing services needed in a rural environment, just having enough providers out there, yeah. Phones don't work, so you can't reach the family. Collaborating with other providers, language barriers, exclamation point, lack of providers, not being able to reach the family. Yeah, Emily says difficult conversations such as about does the child have autism spectrum disorder. Scheduling can be hard. Not hearing from the family, families moving around. Aligning services with the child and family goals, that can be hard. Boy, you guys are fast. I'm reading as fast as I can. transient families, homeless families, families that are moving around a lot. I definitely see lack of providers and language barriers popping up a lot. Not understanding cultural differences. Or Emily says maybe parents not invested in services. So there's so many different complexities that can challenge us to implement these practices. But that's part of our job to overcome them. It's sort of one of our superpowers as service coordinators, to find ways to overcome them, to provide the best, most comprehensive services to all families. Emily says, too much paperwork. Yeah, that can definitely be and that's a challenge. I would guarantee all of you guys from across the country, we could all go here. The paperwork is a challenge, just so much of it. Okay, so let's look at our last two principles. Principle number 5, I like principle number 5, it's kind of a heavy one. So practitioners support family functioning, promote family confidence and competence, and strengthen family and child relationships by acting in ways that are really capacity building. So I think Family Practice 5 talks about how to implement the key principles Maria talked about. So if we really truly believe that all families, when they have the support they need, can enhance their children's development. And that means all families. Some families that we walk in and they are ready to go. They meet us at the door ready to go. Others are struggling with a variety of really basic, important needs that make it harder for them. But we're going to approach the relationship with the belief that all families want the best for their children and they're all trying hard. And what their parenting looks like will vary for lots of variables. We're not there to judge it, we're there to support it. So let's look at the last one here, family practice number 7. We're going to work closely with families to identify, access, and use informal and formal resources to help them address the outcomes that are important to them. Right? So it reminds us to go back to what's important to the families. So what we're hoping is that you walk away from today's webinar feeling confident that there are guiding principles and practices out there for service coordinators. I know I've heard service coordinators say, well, all the training is for the service providers, but there's guidance for you. So I hope that you will take these and spend a little time reflecting. So with that said, these are principles, these are the shoulds. This is what your practices should look like. And then, like we touched on some of those challenges, implementing these practices can be messy, right? So you've mentioned some of the things that can be challenging when we're trying to implement those principles. Type it in the chat for me and pick out what are some of those dynamics that can especially affect our relationships with families. What are some of the dynamics that can make it challenging sometimes to build some of those strong relationships? You might have typed some of those into chat, but I want you to hone in specifically on that relationship piece now. So type some of those into chat. What are the dynamics that challenge us with our relationship building? Custody issues, families who are struggling with drug use. So these are some pretty significant issues within the family. So they've got things going on that it can be hard to build that reciprocal relationship. Maybe parents who appear to us not to be interested, and there could be varieties of reasons. Some families come to early intervention and they're there and they don't want to be there, but there are also families that have got so much else going on. Our early intervention relationship just doesn't make it to the top of the priority list. I see busy family schedules, mental health issues, families who sometimes come guarded. I remember working with a family who were very reluctant to share anything with me because the father had said, if you tell her anything, she could take our children away. I mean, what a guttural fear for a parent. So I had to back up, re-explain early intervention, and talk about why I was there, because with that level of fear, I'm surprised they let me in the door. So maybe a family who's not comfortable with that partnership, parents who aren't on the same page, a child illness. A child illness can rock a family's world, yep. Difficulty getting the family to respond. Maybe other caregivers, grandparents, other family members that don't believe in the services, that say, oh, he'll talk when he's 5, don't worry about it. Working with different generations, that can be a challenge and cause us to be mindful of the interaction skills that we use. So, there's all kinds of things that we have to overcome. But I invite you to go back to those principles and practices and think about how can I implement them in this situation. And then when you find principles that you're struggling with, think of what could I do differently to build a better relationship with this family? How can I overcome this? How can I support the family's confidence, support their functioning, and encourage healthy relationships, not only among our team members, but within the family? So lots to think about. So I'm going to turn this back over to Maria because we want to talk a little bit more about real-world challenges. Maria?
All right, thanks, Dana. Building strong relationships with families requires service coordinators to do 4 activities that you see on screen. I think we all recognize that establishing rapport, building trust, managing professional boundaries, and gathering information from families are important service coordination activities. How we do these things really matters. It also matters when we don't do them. That's when we see a breakdown with our relationship with families, and then it's important to remember, and it really is key to remember, that it's the job of the service coordinator, not the family, to make things work. Next, we're going to look at a real-world scenario that may look really familiar to you. We're going to read it, and then we're going to think about what the service coordinator should do to improve the situation. As you're thinking about what the service coordinator should do to improve the situation, also think about our principles and the practices that we talked about. This scenario is a really bad example of service coordination. As I'm reading it and as you see it, always think about how this could have been improved. So we're going to take a look at the scenario. So when Sandy visits Micah's family, she rushes in 20 minutes late. She tells his grandmother all about her rough day and the fight she had with her boyfriend last night. Then she dives into paperwork and fails to explain the forms or give his grandmother enough time to read them. She notices that Micah is drinking soda and admonishes her for letting him have it because it's bad for him. When Micah's grandmother asks about resources for housing, Sandy says she's been too busy to look into that, but might have some time next week. So I'm sure as I read this, or even as you skim through the scenario, a lot of red flags jumped out for you. So take a minute and use your chat box and jot down some of the red flags that you see in this scenario. Lori is saying, do not talk about yourself. Absolutely, Lori. Colorado is saying, being late. So Jessica is saying we must start over completely, not explaining the paperwork. Casey is saying judgmental. Beth again, explaining the paperwork. Rushing in with your own agenda. I love John's comment, not respecting the grandmother's concerns and issues. And absolutely, John, I think that is so key. Remember, we talked about really being flexible and adapting and addressing the family's concerns. And, in this case, Sandy just kind of brushes it aside and said that she doesn't even confirm that she'll do this next week. She said she might have time next week. Pat is saying lectures the grandmother about soda. Someone is saying yikes. Lorna brings up a really good point. Sandy makes the visit all about her, nothing to help the family. Absolutely. She dives right into paperwork, not even checking in to see how the grandmother is doing, what's going on. Thank you, everyone. Let's continue, with this scenario. We're going to keep it on the screen. We're going to work through the same scenario. And even though, we had a lot of comments about professional boundaries, I want you to use the chat box to just jot down how Sandy could do differently in managing professional boundaries. And I'm going to go ahead and and look at the chat box and go over some of them that have already been posted. So Jessica said you must never put your needs before the family's. Absolutely. You're forgetting the profession you are in. So really, the family's needs, the minute you walk into the door, the focus is on them. Your needs are not important in that time, in that situation. Laura is saying the family is the priority. Someone from CFC4 is saying she should have asked what the concerns were instead of talking about herself. She should also have explained the paperwork and given Grandma time to review them. Nancy saying Sandy needs some reflective supervision. Tanya saying it's not about her. Sarah brings up a great point. Manage your calendar so you have enough time to be fully present for each family. Absolutely, taking that time and being respectful of the time and really devoting that time to the family is very important. Lorna is saying SCs have to check our issues at the door. Absolutely.
You know, Maria, I just wanted to jump in because this made me think about the earlier comment that said we needed to leave our judgy pants at the door. I love that. I wondered what people think about the part where she admonishes Micah's grandma about the soda. What could she do differently? I'm just curious, what do you guys think? What would, you might not have started that conversation, to tell her it's bad for him, but what would you do? What should a service coordinator do? Because that's a real judgy pants kind of issue. I don't know, Maria, if you have some ideas about what you might have done with that kind of an issue, or...
Yeah, I think one of the things, and it's key with service coordinators, that I always think about is asking for more information
yes.
in a respectful way. Really finding out. Rather than admonishing her, I might think maybe that's the only thing in the fridge, or maybe someone else gave the soda, or maybe this is the only thing he will drink. So really, and I'm going to say, really working together with the grandmother to find that information and really engaging in this non-judgmental conversation. It might lead to something that the grandmother wants to work on. It might not, but really going down that path in a non-judgmental way and really thinking about and working together. And I think the key word is together. Not to judge what's going on, but really gather information and come up with a joint solution.
Yeah. That's a great point. I love the way you approach that, because you're trying to step back from our judgment, right, and think, and I saw some comments in the chat right along with that maybe her priority is just getting liquid in him, Brandy says. Maybe, it's not so much about the soda, but she wants to keep him hydrated. I love CFC4 says, does he drink soda often? Tell me more about that. So there's no judgment, like it's just something I've noticed. And then some of you even said, maybe I wouldn't even bring that up at this point. And if this is an early visit, or Sandy is already still kind of started the visit off wrong, as you guys said. But maybe this isn't the best time to bring it up anyway. So you'd have to kind of figure that out in the context. I mean, there are certainly, you could say there are bigger fish to fry if the grandmother's worried about housing for that family. So like Maria said, I think you made a good point. We're asking for more information. Sarah says, ask questions without passing judgment is huge. Absolutely. Let's see. You guys, I loved it. Some of you said when Maria asked, what could we do differently? Some of you just said everything. She really just needed to back up. Kind of, if we could have a redo, we would redo so much about this video. She wouldn't be, or this visit. She wouldn't be late. She wouldn't be judgmental. She wouldn't disclose so much. Lots of improvement here. Hopefully, you guys don't walk into a video and have, or video. I keep saying video. You don't walk into a visit and have this experience, but. Wow, if you run across somebody who does, we need to pause there, right, Maria?
Whoops, sorry, absolutely. Or sometimes you may be the second person to go in and you hear about an experience like this, and that again, as the service coordinator, you're going back and reframing the relationship and really thinking about those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thanks, Maria. So I just wanted to throw one out there that's clearly not a strong example, but to get us all thinking about, hopefully none of you saw yourself in this case study. You know, sometimes you might think, oh yeah, there's been times when I've been late, or there's been times when I was distracted by a personal issue, or times where I thought, oh, I wasn't really happy with what the family had going on. But the important piece, just like Maria said, is to step back, ask for information, and remember that we're there to support that healthy relationship and that strong partnership with families in ways that are non-judgmental, so that we can help them move forward to what's important to them. So it's not easy. It's certainly not easy. Another thing that can be challenging, and we wanted to get some information from you, we know that the only challenges you face are not related to building relationships with families, right? We've talked about paperwork, other types of things. Lorna says, yeah, we're not in the family to police them, but to offer support. So there can be other challenges with building relationships with and among your teams. Even if we step back, these can affect our relationships with families too. So if we pull the lens back a little bit, pull it off the family and think more broadly across our entire team, what are some challenges you've faced with building relationships with your team? So try to think about that, pull back a little bit. Any challenges that you've come across with sort of that team building relationship idea? And I'll tell you, I'm asking because this might be where one of our future webinars go. We thought we might talk about the broader team in addition to including the family as well. So I see folks are talking communication, attitudes, working with an untrustworthy team member. Trust is so important. Different opinions, being a new service coordinator, and joining the team when service providers have been there for a long time. Yeah, one provider wants to control everything. Having trouble building rapport. Scheduling can be, yeah, lack of therapists. We saw that one before. I think that's come up several times. Team members who are pushy and having a... Go ahead, Maria.
I was going to say, Lorna brings up a really good point. Sometimes service providers not understanding what the role is of the service coordinator, which can really create a big challenge. So really educating the service providers about the role, the vital role of the service coordinator.
So that's a great point. So I'm curious. I'm going to get you guys to pause your thoughts on the challenges and now switch to typing into chat. What do you do? How do you make sure that your service providers understand your role on the team? What kind of things do you do to help educate them or raise their awareness of what service coordinators do, what your role is? Tell me in chat. What are some strategies you use to make sure? So ITC of Southside, that's my folks in Virginia. Be firm and state our practice manual, so let them know you know what you're talking about. Speak to them one-on-one. Use open communication. Share what we learn in service coordination training. That's great. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Brandy says they have a new provider orientation for their service providers, so that's great. You can embed that in there. Training, explaining the role of the service provider in front of the family or the service coordinator in front of the family so everybody knows. That's great. Repeat and communicate. Explain the role to the parents in front of the providers. Yeah, I think that's a great, because the team, there's no team without the family, so making sure everybody knows. You know, and I can think of another one that I had used in the past is taking some time to get to know the service providers outside of your team meetings. So, I mean, outside of the home visits with the family, so that, you know, we could build a little bit of a rapport and a relationship, get to know each other. Because when you get to know each other a little bit personally, then it's, you know, I've just had people say they're more, you know, my providers are more likely to call me back when I get to know them well because they're busy too. So spending some time building the rapport with them on an individual basis like we do with families can be important. I don't know, Maria, did you have any other thoughts about things you might have done to establish that early role with your providers and your families?
You know, I really, you know, I used your idea a lot about finding out about providers and getting to know providers outside of IFSP meetings. Also, someone mentioned using the practice manual and referring to it. That is kind of like in my previous years as a service coordinator, that was really the bridge where I would say, like, not even judge them, but like kind of approach it like I would with a family, like in having a challenging provider. Tell me more. Let's find out. Let's explore this together. So sometimes the service coordinator is in this position that they're really saying, like, this is the system, you can't do that, but really bringing them to the realization themselves and really kind of guiding them there to really jointly come to that solution. So I always like to approach the same way that I approached families in getting more information and moving forward from that.
Good, yeah, absolutely, because many of our service providers come to early intervention without having engaged with a service coordinator before. You know, like that's a unique role to our system. They might not be as familiar with what you do. I loved it. One of the comments said, I tell them that I'm the glue. I'm the glue that holds us all together, and I'm your main contact person. And then I think it's also on the service coordinator to keep up that regular contact to make sure that our service providers, just like the families, know they're important to us too. So we've got a couple of other good strategies here. Do monthly contacts to check in with providers. Ask them to share how they think things are going with the families, so that's great. And service providers sometimes think the service coordinator works for them rather than an equal team member. So yeah, some of that rapport building is really important to help the service providers respect you at an equal level too. So these are good strategies. I hope you've gotten one or two you can walk away from the webinar today with. So I see our time. We've got about 12 minutes left. As we start to wrap up today, I think Maria and I hope you've gotten some ideas, maybe gotten another resource or two you want to go back and look at, and hopefully have seen in the chat, remember we have people all over the country, seen common strengths, maybe some common challenges, you're not alone, but also seen that we all understand how important this role is, and we're hoping to build some more resources, more work in the National Service Coordination Training Workgroup to help you in local programs build these relationships with families and your team members. Pat says, nice to know we all have the same challenges. We're all trying to overcome them. Yep. Nicole said, would love more resources and training's good. So stay tuned, Nicole. Hopefully we will have some exciting stuff coming up. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Maria Mattis to walk us through just a few reminders before we wrap up.
All right, thank you. Wow, this was such good information, and I love the way that everyone has really been sharing their thoughts and ideas that they've been experiencing. So, as to kind of wrap this up, I did post a link earlier about the resources that Dana and Maria have shared. I've also just posted it again. So the DEC recommended practices, the key principles, and a bunch of other things that they have referenced can all be found in this one document. Also, we will, as Dana said, they'll be looking at having ideas for some future webinars, so be on the lookout for that. And as I had shared in the beginning, you will be getting an email from the EI training program, Illinois EI training program, that will have that survey link in there. So once you complete that survey, that's really going to be the part that tells Dana and Maria and the rest of that group what you really are interested in learning more about. So please make sure you complete that survey. We can only provide the information that we know you want. So if you tell us, that helps. And then, as we mentioned earlier too, this survey, the certificate of attendance, does offer a state licensure credit for OT, PT, SLPs, social worker, and nutrition dietitian. But just make sure that that will also be applicable to your own state. Most of them they are, but I don't know all of them. So.
Well, Maria, I'd be impressed if you did. If you could say, yes, this state and this state, that would be amazing.
I just don't have that kind of memory. So, Dana, Maria, I want to thank you guys so much for your time, and this was awesome. Do you have anything else you want to share before we go?
Yeah, I wanted to just draw attention. I'm going to take us back just a second on our slides. I wanted to make sure you guys knew that on the resource page, you have a resource for follow-up. So if you are a trainer or a supervisor or somebody that wants to share this information with your team, the webinar will be archived at the link you see below, and then you have this follow-up document that includes some reflection questions your group can use to continue the discussion about the role of the service coordinator. So please check that out and use it. We're hoping that that will be a helpful resource for you. And then Maria and I, our emails are here on the screen. If there's something else we can do or you want to send us more ideas or feedback, we're happy to have have you contact us as well. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you guys for participating, and it's nice to see some of the positive feedback in the chat. Maria, it's been a pleasure to co-facilitate with you, with both Marias, actually.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed today. I hope it's one webinar of many, and I want to thank both Maria and Dana for co-facilitating. Thanks, everyone.
So thanks, everybody. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and stay tuned for more information about future webinars. Bye.
Bye.